2025 was my most eclectic reading year ever. It changed the way I read, the books I choose, the way I look at the world surrounding books, including what the industry sells and recommends, what it pushes forward, what Bookstagram, BookTok, and BookTube recommend. It changed my view on top lists, it changed my view on awards, and it made things different and very, very interesting. My name is Ksenia. I'm an author of novels, plays, a screenplay. I'm a mixed media artist and an avid reader. Welcome to my channel. Now, before we keep talking about books, I have to say a couple of things after my first video. This is my second video ever in English. And after the first one, I discovered two important things. One was that my volume was too low, and I hope that is all working perfectly today. And the second was that my 16-year-old son watched my video and commented on the like and subscribe icons saying, "What is this, 2015? We do not do that anymore. So these you will never see again, but do like this video and do subscribe to this channel because we need to tell the algorithm that this is worthy content." That said, why was 2025 my most eclectic reading year ever? Well, it was for two reasons. The first was joining the 52 book challenge, which I will talk about in a separate video. It is a challenge organized each year by the 52 Book Club, where you are to read 52 books in 52 weeks, something that I already do, so it felt perfect for me, but it allowed me to diversify my reading because you have 52 prompts that you're supposed to follow and that push you to read outside of your comfort zone. That was exactly my aim. So that was one thing. The second thing was that I went down the BookTok rabbit hole. And I'm not saying this in a negative way, but by following BookTok in the languages that I speak. So I was following, obviously, the American, the English BookTok community, but also the Spanish, the Italian, the French, and the Slavic from former Yugoslavia. I noticed that most of the creators were recommending the same ones. And I made the mistake of believing that that was out of their genuine quality and not because creators were paid to recommend those books. I discovered that when I was promoting my book and trying to get it in front of creators, and when I received their prices, and was quite shocked because we were talking about thousands of dollars to get someone to even mention your book, which I did not spend. I have to admit that for the most part, I did not love the books that were recommended, but two of them have made it onto my top 15 list of today, and one of them has made it on my top list of favorites of all time. Also, something that I should explain before I start is how I rank books, how I rate them from 1 to 5 to even 6 stars. So I have not given 1 star to maybe 3 or 4 books in my life because it has to be either something that I viscerally hated because of how the story developed and what happened, or that I considered in very poor quality. And an example of a book I viscerally hated is actually a classic. It is Tirano Banderas by Valle Inclán. I read it at university, and I still remember how over the top cruel and brutal it was, and how much I resented it emotionally and couldn't wait to put it down. It was about this tyrant. I don't remember very much, but it was about this tyrant, Banderas, who was, I believe, in a Latin American country. He was a dictator, and everything was over the top. He had this green saliva dripping from his mouth all the time. He kept his daughter imprisoned, if I remember correctly. It was a half incestuous relationship with her. It was just overwhelming. Two stars go to books that I consider to be of terrible quality, but I did read or I DNF'd, did not finish. 3 stars are for books that are mediocrely written and were somewhat entertaining. 4 stars go to the majority of books. They go either to books that are very well written, but I did not enjoy the story, or to books that had an amazing story but were not well written and I could not in good conscience give 5 stars to. 5 stars are books that are amazing prose, even if I didn't adore the story, but they were so beautifully written and the story wasn't disliked by me. I didn't adore it, but or books that had such an amazing story and were well written, which is the majority of the books on my top 15 today. Finally, I sometimes, once in a while, give 6 stars, and those are books that I will remember forever, that changed me forever, that did something to me that makes them transcendental reads, and I will make a video of my 6-star reads for sure in the future. So now that all that housekeeping has been done, let's go to my top list, my top 15 reads, my favorite 15 reads of 2025. And I will go in reverse order. So I will start with number 15, which is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. It's one of the only 2 books I physically have from my top 15 list because I'm someone who moves a lot and I have stopped buying books as much as I can, physical books obviously, and reading digitally on my Kindle or listening to audiobooks because I have no more room in my house and for books, and on the other hand because it has become unsustainable with all the moves we have as a family to be buying and storing so many books. Now, this is a gorgeous piece of literature. It has an epistolary fragmented structure, meaning that it's a series of fictional letters or diary entries dedicated to the narrator's mother. Letters that she will never read, and where he tells her their story, how he lived it, how it has impacted him. It is a stunning piece of writing. It's a short book, but very dense, emotionally very heavy. There were parts that I had difficulty reading because of not the way the prose was written, but the subject, the content, especially the sexual scenes, which I found too graphic for me, not because I'm judgmental towards writing about sex. I do it in my own prose, but because this was too graphic for me. I don't know. It made me uncomfortable. I didn't want it to make me uncomfortable, but it did. And I was wondering while reading whether the author wanted the reader to be uncomfortable, or this is the way he generally thinks about how to treat these subjects. I loved the structure so much that I have decided to use it in my new novel, the one I'm writing right now. It's going to be a series of fragmented letters from the narrator to another person in their life, but my subject matter is a whole other story. It's actually based on a true story, but we will talk about that some other time. At number 14, we have a bestseller from 2025, and that was Tom Lake by Ann Pathcett. Now, I consider Ann Pathcett a master of modern prose, and while her stories are not my favorite type of plot and my favorite type of narration, I read them happily, and I'm happily waiting for her June release of Whistler because the way she writes is truly a masterclass of modern storytelling. One of the principles that we use in writing novels, and not just novels, is called show, don't tell. You're not supposed to say that somebody's angry. You're supposed to show it by the way they behave and the way they react. And Ann Pathcett is the queen of the show, don't tell. Tom Lake starts with an audition for a local production of Our Town. And it shows all these characters. The main character, the narrator, is part of the organization of the play, or actually of the audition, because her grandma is the seamstress that is going to do the costumes, and she signs up people coming for the audition. And by the way, these people come prepared to go on stage and then act on stage. She has showed, instead of telling, everything there is to know about the place where the story is starting. Then it will go to other venues and to other geographical locations. And I thought that was amazing. I did prefer Tom Lake to The Dutch House, and it's an excellent read. It's a beautiful story. Like I said, just not the kind of story I tend towards, but it's an excellent one, and I recommend it wholeheartedly. At number 13, we have a very short book, which is Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. The book is talking about the Magdalens. They were girls that were considered to either immoral or too feisty for their families to deal with them, and were put in these convents where they either gave birth to these illegitimate children that often disappeared, where they were worked, often to death, abused, often to death, and suffered horrible, horrible fates. I loved how this story was understated, how the treatment of the events was understated, and I especially loved the fact that the person facing this moral dilemma is a simple man with a simple life. It's not a hero, a superhero. It's somebody who is trying to make their way in this little life that they're living, and trying to decide what the right course of action is. It's a one-day read, like I said, very short, but a beautiful, beautiful story. At number 12, I have an outlier because it's a script and not a novel, and that is Fleabag, The Scriptures by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Fleabag was a TV series that I struggled a little bit to get into because I found it, again, a tad too crude, and just the way it starts didn't hook me immediately, but I decided to stick with it because I saw that so many people were recommending it, and boy did I love it. Not so much season 1, but season 2 with one of my favorite actors of today, which is Andrew Scott. What he did with the role of the priest, who then got renamed into Hot Priest, is a masterpiece. It's amazing, and the chemistry between the two of them is amazing. And I wanted to learn from Phoebe Waller-Bridge, as someone who has so far written and produced one script, is about to produce another one and to direct it. I wanted to see how she managed to do this, and I wanted to study the script, and it was really fun and really entertaining. Now, if you're not one for reading scripts, or if you're somebody who gets offended very easily, this is not for you. I don't recommend it, but it was something I truly loved, truly enjoyed, so it had to be on this list. Number 11 is an American classic, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. It's a book that you simply have to read, like To Kill a Mockingbird. It might not end up in your favorites of all time, or it might end up being on top of your favorites of all time, but it's just one of those. Written beautifully, a coming-of-age story, a story about extreme poverty, about extreme resilience in the face of such poverty, and I thought it was a gorgeous read. I loved it, every page. I recommend it to anyone who's looking for a high quality, great classical book from the 20th century. And now we get into my top 10, the books I enjoyed the most. And number 10 was my greatest discovery of 2025. The 52 book challenge required us to have a book that won the Edgar Award. I ended up reading 2, but this was the first one I discovered, and I actually ended up labeling it as something else. But it's from an author named James Lee Burke that was an unknown to me. I Googled him and discovered that the man has published 46 books. He's an author from, I think, Louisiana, the south of the United States. And when I saw that he published 46 books, and yet I didn't know about him, and many people I know didn't know about him, I thought, they must be really bad books. Well, turns out that the man is a master. Flags on the Bayou, it's a book about complex moral themes. It is beautifully written, evocative prose, excellent character depth, and all of that is there to tell a story that is unputdownable because it's action-packed and very, very interesting and filled with twists and turns that you do not expect. So this was my bread and butter. A riveting story, beautifully told with great character depth, and I can't wait to get my hands on another book by James Lee Burke. So he was my grand discovery that I'm very proud of for 2025. At number 9, we have another author that I did not expect, and this one is not literary fiction. This one is more popular fiction, which I usually either avoid or read when I have just finished something very heavy and need to decompress. This was one of the book talk recommendations that I followed and loved, and it is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Now, I am a listener of rock music. I grew up in the 90s. I was a teenager in the 90s, and my playlist, even though maybe I don't look the part anymore, is the grunge and the hard rock of the 90s. So we're talking Nirvana, we're talking Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains for sure, Tool for sure, and other artists like them, Tori Amos too, but that's another story for another time. This is Daisy Jones and the Six, is the fictional story of a rock band that comes together and then eventually falls apart. I'm not spoiling that for you because it's stated on the first page. But it was so much fun. It was like watching a rock documentary, which I love to do. And I found myself wondering whether these people really existed. That's how well it was executed, especially in the audiobook format. And if you can listen to audiobooks, please listen to this one instead of reading the physical book. And if you don't like or feel that you can't read audiobooks, here's one that can get you started. It is narrated by multiple fantastic actors, and it really felt like watching or listening to an amazing podcast. I had so much fun. I loved it, and I keep buying it as a gift to anyone who I know loves rock music. I also watched the TV series, didn't love it as much, but there's that too in case you're interested. It also pushed me to read other books by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read Malibu Rising, which I enjoyed very much. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which wasn't my favorite, but it was okay. And After I Do, which I did not love. All that said, at number 8, we have a book that I had avoided for over a decade, and that was The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I am not a fan of war literature, and especially World War II literature. But this is not a book that takes place on the battlefield. It actually takes place in people's homes. And it was incredibly interesting because, first of all, the narrator was very aptly for this kind of story, Death. That narrates the story of Liesel, a young girl, German girl that is going through World War II, loves reading, steals some books, as the title indicates. I wept at the end, which is always a plus for me, because if a book manages to make me cry, it means I'm going to remember it forever. It was an excellent read, but I will say that I still prefer Bridge of Clay by Markus Zusak. That was my kind of story, my kind of characters, and he is an author that I will return to. At number 7, I have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book, which is Go as a River by Shelley Reid. Gorgeous prose. The story is so sad and so riveting, and I found myself actually feeling angry that the book ended. I wanted to know more. I needed to know what happened afterwards, and I was angry. To be clear, she didn't leave the book unfinished. It's not one of those. The book is finished, but I needed to know what happened afterward, and I wish I could meet the author so she could tell me in her mind what happened afterward. This happens often to me with my books, that people ask me what happened after the story, after the last page, and I say, well, you tell me. But I do have my own idea, and I would love to hear what hers was. Number 6 is Americanah by Chimamanda Ngozi. Ngozi? Not sure. Adichie. I jokingly always say that she's my queen. I think that the woman is a stunning author and storyteller, and was very sad to hear that she was going through a writer's block and didn't publish for a decade after this book. Actually, last year, her new book, Dream Count, came out, and it's on my TBR to be read list for 2026. It's there on my shelf. And I had read her first novel, Half of a Yellow Sun, and while I don't remember too much of the story because it was 20 years ago, it was about Biafra, I remember the feelings it evoked, and I remember it leaving me very impressed. Now, Americanah is a completely different kind of story, and it's a big book, but it was very interesting to me, and it taught me many things. One of them, the main, I would say, thing that it taught me was the difference in how Black people perceive their race, how African Americans do it, and Africans do it. It's a completely different experience of being Black, and that was something that I knew nothing about. Another thing that I found different and interesting was how she showed me a side of Nigeria that I don't usually have the occasion to hear about. The book takes place in the United States and Nigeria, but usually when people write or talk about these places, and that happens to my country too, which angers me, to tell you the truth, it makes you think that there is no middle or upper or wealthy class there, but it's just abject poverty. And here we have a middle class to wealthy Nigeria, Lagos, that I was very curious to find out about. And what I love about Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie is how she can make trivial things feel riveting when you're reading. So one motif that repeats through the book is the motif of hair. I did not know how much work and how much struggles go into these hairstyles, and what these women go through in the Western workplace to keep their hair looking in a way that's acceptable to Western employers. So that was something that I was shocked by, honestly, and very glad to learn about. I'm very excited to read Dream Count, and I hope that she will not have another long break between this book that came out in 2025 and her next one, because she does have readers that are very excited for whatever she publishes. If that woman published a phone book, I think that I would read it. So that's how highly I think of her. And from Chimamanda, we move to my top 5. And at number 5, we have Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This book was recommended to me by a friend years ago, and I somehow never got around to it, which was a shame because it's a short book, it's a quick read, and it's a masterpiece. It's a book that tells the story of Billy Pilgrim, the narrator, who has been lost through time. He no longer has a concept of time, and he tells this fragmented story of his childhood, of his imprisonment during World War II, and him being abducted by aliens. It is actually a metaphor and an amazing representation of PTSD, of how post-traumatic stress disorder affects the mind, fragments the mind, and makes it hard for a person to connect the dots. It was an audiobook for me, of which I'm eternally thankful to myself for making the choice, because it was narrated by Ethan Hawke. Masterfully narrated, I should say. Masterfully written by Kurt Vonnegut and masterfully narrated by Ethan Hawke. And there is this thing that he says over 100 times, I think, whenever he's talking about death. He says, "So it goes." And I swear, even now, it's been a couple of months since I read it. Every time I hear about certain stories, I have Ethan Hawke's voice in my head saying, "So it goes." It's an amazing transcendental book. It's changed the way I look at trauma. And it's a classic. You want to read it. If you want a good, deep, excellent read, you want to go there. At number 4, I have placed a reread, which is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I reread this book because Steinbeck is one of my 2 favorite authors of all time. The other one is Faulkner, and maybe it's contradictory because they couldn't be more different when it comes to the way they treat language, since Faulkner is quite complex, while Steinbeck is a master at using very simple language to express complex thoughts, complex dilemmas and ideas. And I was the producer of Mice and Men when I ran a culture festival here in Montenegro. It was a beautiful play and I love doing it, and it's one of my favorite stories of all time. Now, that said, I had to reread Grapes of Wrath. It's a Nobel Prize winner. It's transcendental novel, but I had the misfortune of picking up a translation, a Serbian translation from maybe 15, 20 years ago, that corresponded to a time in our publishing here in the Balkans when publishing houses and newspapers were printing out classics in bulk, and they often use terrible, terrible translators and didn't even bother to proofread these books decently. And let me tell you something, even John Steinbeck doesn't stand a chance against a terrible translator. This book was clearly translated by 2 separate people, which was shown by the fact that in the first half, Rose of Sharon, had one name, and in the second half another, because of the way the 2 translators treated her name in translation. And it was such bad prose and just such bad manners towards an author that I took the book, threw it in the garbage, and wrote a blog about it and wrote an angry letter to the publisher, which is not something I usually do. It's actually something I never do, but that's how bad it was. And I felt that it wasn't right that such a book would leave such a terrible impression for me. I had to reread it in the original, which I did. And boy, am I glad that I did it. It's not at number one because it's a difficult read. It's not for everyone, but it's a book that I will remember for as long as I'm alive. It's the story of the Dust Bowl migration, when people had to flee Oklahoma because there was this weather phenomenon that lifted. There was this wind, it was a dry season, and it lifted all this dust, and people couldn't breathe. They couldn't live there anymore, and they fled mainly to California to go and pick up grapes and fruit, because the landowners in California printed millions or hundreds of thousands of leaflets inviting people to come over to work, but they actually had a far lower number of spots available, so they would underpay and overwork these people and treat them like garbage. It was a transcendental read because it attacked the cruelty of systems, the banking system, the entrepreneurial system, the othering of the migrants, the othering of people who are trying to find a better life for themselves. And I loved how it showed how sometimes these people who are constantly pushed down need the wrath, the anger, to preserve their dignity, to be able to fight against these oppressive systems to preserve their dignity. And as I was rereading, or in my opinion, reading for the first time, The Grapes of Wrath in English, because that translation, that was not The Grapes of, I don't know what that was, but it was not The Grapes of Wrath, in case it wasn't clear how angry I was at it. I kept thinking of this saying we have in my country, and maybe you have in yours too, and that is, give the man some power and you will see his honor. And that power can be small or it can be large, but it shows you, this book shows you so well what it means when people have absolute power over somebody else. But it also shows you what it means when people come together to survive, to help each other, to be there for each other, to prop each other up, and how they do that in spite of another phenomena that obviously happens when people struggle, and that is that they will sometimes turn on each other because their survival depends on it. So The Grapes of Wrath is one of those books that you want to read for your education, if not for your enjoyment. And I'm sure that many people, like myself, will also find a lot of enjoyment in it. Now, at number 3, I have another John Steinbeck, and that is East of Eden. East of Eden was a modern retelling of the Genesis, the story of Cain and Abel, and it explores the power of free will and of trying to escape one's nature, one's tendencies, but also one's destiny, or what they feel they are predestined to be and to do in life. It was a masterpiece of fiction, beautifully written. The characters are layered, they are difficult, they are riveting, and it was a big book, but unputdownable. I adored it, and it went automatically into my top 5 of all times. I don't know how it eluded me until now, because I love Steinbeck, but it did. And I guess it came to me at the right time, in the right phase of my life to appreciate it as much as I did. Will reread it for sure, because that's how amazing it was. Now, when it comes to my top 2, I have to admit I was undecided as to which one should be number 2, which one should be number 1. And still am a little bit, but I ended up choosing according to how emotional the book was for me. And for that reason, both were, to be clear, but one was more. So number 2 for me is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. It is a retelling of David Copperfield by the Grandmaster Charles Dickens. And I have to tell you, I did not figure that out when I got the book. I don't know how that happened because the name is so similar, but I didn't. I missed it. The point just flew by me. Then, as I was reading it, I realized what was happening, and I realized it was a retelling of David Copperfield. It's the story of a young boy who is orphaned quite soon. He's born into pretty bad circumstances because his mom is an addict in Lee County in Appalachia. And he ends up going through the foster system, going through many different situations, which I will not spoil for you because I don't like spoiling books. The main topic, in my opinion, of the book is the opioid epidemic in America. I, like most Europeans, never understood what was happening and why there were so many people in the United States hooked on opioids, which are pain medications, addictive pain medications. What was happening for that to happen? And I truly couldn't explain it, whether it was some kind of collective crisis that was happening with America, nor could I understand why there was so much distrust, as I am the granddaughter of a doctor, why there was so much distrust in the United States toward pharmaceutical companies and towards doctors. I understood all that. It was all cleared to me when I read Demon Copperhead. So in case you're not from America and you don't know about this, what happened was that there was this pharmaceutical company called Purdue Pharma. And they were owned by the Sackler family. And what they did was they made this opioid, this drug called Oxycontin, which they marketed falsely as being non-addictive. They said that it was less than 1% of a chance of addiction. What they then did to make matters worse was they handpicked an area of the United States, which is Appalachia, that is the least educated, if I understood correctly, the poorest, where they had many mining communities, and that was Lee County. And because these people were miners and these mines were later closed down, these people were left struggling for their livelihood. And at the same time, they were left as miners with many chronic injuries and chronic pain, ailments. So what they did was they aggressively marketed this drug. They corrupted doctors who overprescribed it. They prescribed it to housewives, soccer moms, to athletes, to old people, young people, and it ended with creating an enormous, incredible, unthinkable quantity of heavy drug users and addicts. And you had retired people and these soccer moms and these young people overdosing in mass and switching to heroin in mass when they could no longer get these prescriptions. In that sense, it's a horror story, even though it's not. It's deeply funny at times because Demon is a deeply funny narrator, but a horror story in that it showed, just like the Grapes of Wrath, what systems, greedy systems and corruption can do to people, and how there are unfortunately so many who reach a certain amount of wealth and power, and to them, the poor and the uneducated and the little man becomes cannon fodder. They don't matter anymore. They are something to be toyed with. They broke these people like it was nothing. And I know they were sued. They then changed their company to another one, but I don't see that they have suffered the consequences that so many deaths would have been appropriate for. So that was my number 2. My number 1 read of 2025, without further ado, was a book talk recommendation, and it was a book I adored, and that is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. This was my first Western ever. I'm not a fan of the genre, sorry. I'm European, so... Well, but that doesn't mean anything because my husband loves Western movies, but I never even watched Western movies. I felt like they were all very similar and just, I don't know, with the exception of The Man Who Killed Liberty Wallace, because I love Jimmy Stewart. It's just not a genre I ever gravitated toward, but I did watch Yellowstone. And I'm pretty sure that 1884, the prequel for Yellowstone, was largely inspired by Lonesome Dove, because it's the story of 2 retired Texas Rangers who embarked on a 3,000-mile cattle drive to Montana, which was unexplored back then, uninhabited back then, and it was clearly a very perilous journey. Now, this is not just a journey novel at all. It has so many subplots that it keeps you at the edge of your seat the whole time. But it was, first of all, beautifully written, but also, in case you hadn't noticed, I love these stories of uneducated, simple, poor people who live these little lives that can be unimpressive to somebody when compared to stories of some grandiose, famous historical figures. But these lives are so full of love and suffering and friendship and struggle and overcoming struggle and so much dignity and so much power. I love reading about these, and Lonesome Dove is all about that. It's all about the little man making his way through the world, and also a very, very interesting female character. No, actually 2. Clara is not to be underestimated at all. The show don't tell technique that I mentioned before is masterfully shown here, because done here at the beginning of the story, there is a sign that the main characters have in front of their ranch, which is Lonesome Dove. And the way they compose this sign shows you everything you need to know about who these people are. I was laughing out loud. It's beautiful. And if I have to say something, if I had to put Lonesome Dove, the reading experience of this book, into a short sentence, I would say, for a short paragraph, I would say it was 800 pages of sustained awe at the quality of writing, the quality of the story, of laughing out loud every once in a while, very often, and my family looking at me like I was crazy, which they're used to when I'm reading, and then, in the end, crying like a little kid, and crying so much that my family, who usually mocks me for these things, this time knew better and did not say anything. They just let me be. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous read, made it immediately to my top 5 of all time, maybe even top 3. And so it was the book that marked for me 2025. Thank you for watching until the end. If you want to support me, a great way is to buy my book, Fathers Before Sons. It's available in all online stores. Click like, subscribe, and see you soon.